Alright, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Training for Hiking live Q&A. As always, my name is Rowan, and I'm the founder of Summit Strength, and I specialize in helping hikers get fit, strong, and resilient so they can conquer every adventure. Now, the intention around these Q&As is basically to answer your questions around training and physical preparation for hiking, and just have a little bit of a chance to dive into some subjects, explore a few different exercises, and give you some good advice around how you can best prepare for the trail. Now, the way these typically work is anyone who is watching this live, feel free to pop up any questions in the chat, and feel free to pop up any questions you may have that you want covered. On top of that, I have about 4 different questions that I've sort of had sent through prior to this already, which we're going to be covering today and I'm going to be working through. And essentially the intention for this video is the ones we got sent through, we're going to be talking a little bit about exercise progressions, we're going to talk a little bit about stretching before hiking, a little bit about knee soreness on up hills, and also some alternatives for push-ups if you are looking for some slightly different exercises. So today's stream will probably go for about 40, 45 minutes, something like that, and we'll see where it takes us. So to start with, while we are waiting for anyone who is going to be popping on live, let's have a chat about the first question. And we're going to be talking about exercise progressions. And progressing exercise is a topic I talk about a lot when it comes down to strength training for hiking. And we're going to go into a specific detail of this today. Now, the question for this sort of the question was, I got sent through off a reel and a short that I put up the other day. And someone sort of said, look, I don't quite understand the idea of exercise progressions doing the same exercise. Wouldn't it be better to change to a different exercise? And they were curious about why I was recommending something in a certain way. So to give you a little bit of context, I'm going to show you the actual reel or the actual short which inspired this question so you can have a bit of an idea. So this is the reel that I put up the other day, and it's basically talking about a 6-step forward lunge progression for hikers, where essentially we go through 6 different variations of the forward lunge. We've got our bodyweight forward lunge, where we're just stepping forward and back with your body weight. We got our Zercher forward lunge, where we're holding a pack in the crooks of our elbows. Then we've got our pack on the back, so we're on the pack on the back. Next up, we've got a deficit a deficit forward lunge with body weight, where we're stepping off like a raised height and stepping down and up and going through that. The next one, then we have that Zercher in, so holding that pack in the crooks of the elbows and sort of holding that as we go through. And then we just work through this. And then the final one of this particular reel in this particular series was a pack on the back deficit forward lunge. So essentially there were 6 different ways of doing this particular forward lunge, which I recommended to work through. And going back to the question, they were sort of just asking, look, I'm not 100% sure why we're just doing different versions of this same one. Why would you recommend that? Wouldn't it be better to just do a different exercise if we were going to progress and do something slightly different? Which is fair enough. So let's explore this in a little bit of detail. Now, as a top level view, and something we always want to keep in mind whenever we're looking at strength training is progression is key to strength training over the long term, in the sense of the body gets used to things relatively quickly. And in order for us to continually get stronger and improve our endurance and ultimately help us on the trail, we want to be making sure that we are regularly applying new challenge, new stimulus to ensure the body is moving forward and the body is kind of getting stronger and stronger and stronger. That's one of our topmost principles when it comes down to strength training for hiking. Now, when it comes down to this type of thing, when we're looking at progression or progressive overload, there's lots and lots of different ways we can apply this and lots of different ways you can go about this when you're programming over the long term. Maybe a case of sort of like adding weight. Like if you're doing an exercise for 1 or 3 or 5 or 6 weeks, or whatever it may be, each week, if you add a little bit of weight, a little bit of weight, a little bit of weight, that's progressive overload and that's adding extra challenge. It may be a case of adjusting repetition ranges, and it may be a case of saying, okay, for 4 weeks, I'm going to do this exercise for 10 repetitions at a time. And I'm going to do a little bit of weight. And then for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to keep the same exercise, but now I'm going to do 6 repetitions at the same time, at a time, but I'm going to add a bit more weight. So I'm going to go a bit heavier. And then the next 4 weeks, maybe I'm going to just do body weight, but I'm going to do 15 or 20 repetitions of this. And each phase, we kind of adjust things. Or we can kind of change exercise. We can sort of say, okay, bit by bit by bit, we're just going to do a different exercise to challenge the body, give it new stimulus, and keep it moving forward. All of these work. They're all different ways of programming. There's a million and one other ways of going about this, but that's the general view. Now, when we're looking at changing exercises, and this particular option here, um, there is the option when we're looking at, okay, over the months of taking the option of just doing a different exercise, which works a similar area. So what I mean by that is you may start to put together a program and you may decide I'm going to do step ups for 4 weeks, and step ups predominantly work with quadriceps. So I'm going to do this as an exercise to work my quadriceps. I'm going to do that for about 4 weeks. Then you might be like, okay, I'm looking for a bit of progression. How can I make this a little bit more of a different challenge? Maybe for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to do step downs, where it's a slightly different emphasis, enough of a change, and it'll challenge the body. And in the next 4 weeks, maybe I'll do split squats, which essentially is working the quadriceps, still single leg mostly, and it can be a bit more of a challenge. And then the next week, the next block, maybe we'll do single-legged leg press, where we go to the gym, get on a leg press, and do one leg at a time. And as you can see, it's kind of different exercise, different exercise, different exercise each phase, but they're all kind of working similar areas. And this definitely works, and it's definitely one way you can go about your training. To the kind of original situation, in some situations for people, and in some situations when you're doing training, this definitely works. But some people may just benefit a little bit more from having a bit more consistency in regards to movements, purely for the fact that everyone learns at different speeds. Everyone picks things up at different paces. And realistically, for any new exercise you're doing, it can take a little while to learn the basics of a movement. It can take a little while to learn how the body actually wants to go through the split squat. It can take a little while to go through how the body actually goes through the step down. And just learning the basics of an exercise can take a little while. Now, take that further, like beyond just the basics and just getting it right, actually learning the intricacies of getting an exercise 100% right. It can take a long, long time. It can take weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months. And for people who are doing, more of the higher and advanced stuff, it can take years and years and years to get things perfect. So it definitely can take a while to kind of wrap your head around things. And if you're in the situation where we're like, hey, you know what, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, I'm actually just doing different exercises. Sometimes, if you take a little while to learn things, sometimes we can actually end up just spending a lot of our time just learning things, just figuring things out, and not actually challenging ourselves. So we may end up spending 2 out of every 4 weeks just really wobbling around, figuring out our exercises, and we're not actually pushing ourselves. So sometimes having so much variation is not ideal. On top of that, like if you're in this situation, we're like, well, I don't want a huge amount of variation, but we also don't want to fall in the trap of just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, because that can get boring, that can get stagnant, and stop things going. So that's where we kind of come into this idea of exercise variations, which we've shown before. So the idea behind this is we take a single movement that you're doing, a single movement pattern, which is going to work a particular area, and each phase of training, we keep that same movement, but we just tweak it very, very slightly to make it a little bit more difficult. Now, the idea behind this is the tweaks we make, it may just be a tiny, tiny little change, but it makes it a little bit more difficult and it makes it a little bit more challenging. So there can be your progression. And on top of that, when we're looking at variation and giving the body new exercises, the body in itself, if we just do a tiny tweak and change to how we actually do an exercise, this can kind of trick the body into thinking that it's kind of a brand new exercise and bump up its progress so we are moving forward. It's a really, really simple way of sort of getting the benefits of all that learning we've done previously. So the first 4 weeks you spent learning an exercise, all that learning will be relevant as we go into the next one. So if we go back to that reel, as you can kind of see, this could last you 6 weeks, 6 steps, 4 weeks at a time. That could last you 24 weeks of training going through this and 24 weeks of learning of getting better and better and better. Because if we go back to this, we can say, okay, the bodyweight lunge, pretty straightforward. We can figure this out. And then essentially the next version, when we've got this Zercher period, where we're essentially just holding the weight out our front, this in itself, it just changes the posture requirements. It changes the balance requirements. It changes what muscles have to activate and how they have to activate. So even though it's pretty much the same as what we were doing before, the body thinks it's something new. And then basically we go from that Zercher to the pack on the back. Again, it just changes the emphasis on how we're going through things. And it's enough of a change to keep that going forward. So when it comes down to this type of stuff, I like using these variations. I think it can be really, really effective. I typically, for myself and my programming, I will usually kind of use a combination of both those approaches. So I'll use those exercise variations. I'll change exercises here and there. And we kind of just depends on person to person and how we kind of like to approach things. But it's definitely a legitimate method of progression. It's definitely a great way of going about things. And sometimes we don't need such a massive, dramatic change. tiniest little change can go a long way. So hopefully that makes sense. For anyone who does have questions off that, feel free to let me know. It is a big topic, and the whole concept of exercise programming, the whole idea of exercise programming, there's so many different facets and ideas that goes into this. This is just a tiny little thing. But hopefully that does make sense. So that's enough on that particular question, talking about exercise progressions. What I'm going to do is if anyone want to check that video out, just so they can see what I'm talking about, I'm going to pop it in the chat for both YouTube and Facebook. So if you want to check that out, you can have a bit of a look. So with that being said, as I'm going through, anyone who is watching live, if you do have any questions, do you want to know covered, feel free to pop it in the chat. I'm more than happy to help out. So, next question. Let's talk a little bit about stretching before hiking. And this is a question actually just came up in the community group just overnight. I think it's definitely worthwhile talking about. Basically, the question is, and this is kind of something that pops up all the time, is it important to stretch or warm up before hiking? Now, the context of this is, in all honesty, probably when it comes down to hikers, 98% of hikers probably don't do a warm up before they hit the trail. Most hikers will turn up to the trailhead, they'll get their pack on, maybe have a drink of water, wait, make sure everyone's there, do their gear check, and then away they go. But on the flip side, typically when we're looking at exercise and training, you'll often see people sort of saying, hey, you know what, before we do any type of exercise, we probably want to have a bit of a warm up, or we probably want to stretch before exercise. Or what people say is like you'll be at risk of injury or whatever that be. So the question is, if this is recommended or people say we should be doing it before normal exercise, should I be doing it before hiking? And that's the question. And realistically, when it comes down to this, the whole concept of stretching before exercise, like it can be useful. It's probably not as dramatically important as a lot of people make it out to be. A lot of people survive their training without doing any specific warm-ups, whatever it may be. It can be useful in certain situations, but it's not a case of saying, hey, if you don't warm up, you're going to be injured. It's not quite as simple as that. Really, when it comes down to when we're talking about hiking and we're talking about warming up for hiking, it really does come down to context in the sense that if you're in a situation and you're a regular hiker or whatever it may be, you go out and hit the trail and you go out and you start hiking, you don't do any warming up and you're perfectly fine, then you're probably fine to just keep on doing what you're doing. If you don't have any issues with this, if you don't have any problems with this, it all kind of feels good, go right ahead, it's all good. Realistically, when we're looking at warm-ups for exercise, we kind of want to be looking at lower intensity exercise, which eases the body into training. Hiking in itself, it's pretty low intensity for the most part. It is just walking in quotation marks. And for the most part, it does ease us in. And yes, you may be a little bit slower at first, but then you can walk for a few minutes, get a little bit better, and slowly get a bit better, bit better, bit better. Works out pretty well. So if you are perfectly fine, you don't warm up, you don't have any issues, happy days, don't even worry about it. However, there are a few situations where this may very well be worthwhile considering having a bit of a warm up, having a bit of a stretch. And there's kind of typically three things that I kind of think like this. Number one is if you're the type of person who does struggle with aches, pains, or just muscle tightness at the start of the day. So, for example, if you're someone who struggles with knee pain, or hip pain, or ankle pain, or foot pain, or if you're just the type of person first thing in the day, you're just a bit stiff, just a bit tight, you just take a while to get moving, considering doing a bit of a warm up, considering doing a bit of stretching may be worthwhile. Not in the sense of saying, hey, if I don't stretch, I'm automatically going to get pain. But if I do a bit of stretching, sometimes it can just make it a bit more comfortable. Pretty simple. The other situation is, if you're immediately starting on a steep ascent or descent. So if you're starting on a hike which is just nice and flat, you can ease into it, happy days. But if you're starting and immediately the hike's like this, or immediately you're at the top of the valley and you're just going straight down, yeah, it may be worthwhile doing something before you start. Because that may not be the most gentle way of introducing your body to exercise. That may not be the most gentle way of easing your body in. It may be pretty intense straight up. And if you're not warm, you're not prepared, sometimes that can be just a little bit uncomfortable. And then number three, sometimes mentally people just need a little bit of transition between, okay, what I've done in like getting to the trailhead and starting hiking. Like mentally, I'm just not quite there. Or alternatively, if you're on your overnighter or multi-dayer, some people packed up my gear, have my brekkie, but again, I'm just not quite mentally ready to kind of get started. So if you just are the type of person just needs something to kind of get you rolling, maybe worthwhile considering a bit of a warm up. In any of these situations, doing some quick stretches, doing some quick, warming up, whatever it may be worthwhile. It doesn't have to be the most complicated thing in the world. It doesn't have to be the most, extended thing in the world, but just sort of doing some short and sharp and simple can go a long way. Typically, what I recommend when it comes down to warming up for hiking is looking at something that wants to be quick, wants to be simple, wants to be targeted. What I mean by that, quick, not something that's going to take forever, not something that's going to be holding up your hiking buddies and making you self-conscious, but something that may take you 5 minutes at the most, which you can kind of just tick on. Simple is just choosing simple exercises which don't require any equipment. More often than not, requiring like you can do it kind of anywhere, just something really, really straightforward. And then targeted, just making sure, okay, we're just doing 5 minutes. We kind of want to make sure we are targeting the right areas that are going to give us the best results or the best effects to help us feel more comfortable initially with our hiking. So when we're looking at our main areas that we kind of want to hit, if we're looking at targeted warm-ups for hiking, main areas we typically want to think about leading into things is warming up your ankles, warming up your hips, and potentially warming up your mid-back if you are carrying a pack or whatever it may be. So the idea behind that is your ankles, your hips, your mid-back, they're the three big joints which want a lot of mobility. They're the three big joints that want a lot of movement. But for a lot of us, we tend to be quite tight in these areas. And if we're tight, sometimes that can just lead us to feeling a bit uncomfortable initially until the blood gets moving. So working on these areas can go a long way. So to give you a few really, really simple ideas, I'll kind of show you this article, and I'll share it in the chat as well. This article kind of talks about this topic in detail, but basically some really, really simple things. If we are looking at a stretch for your ankles, and basically a simple one for hiking, this is one I really, really like, the knee wall. It's very, very simple. Essentially, you may not be able to see that super well. Oops, I don't even know if that's working. Yeah, that should be fine. You may not be able to see this super well, but hopefully it's showing up. But yeah, the knee wall. You can kind of do this at the trailhead. You can do this like anywhere. The idea behind this is essentially just keeping the heel on the floor, driving the knee forward, getting a little bit of stretch down the back of the ankles. Very, very, very simple, but goes a long way. You might just do like 10 to 15 repetitions of this on each side. Super simple, gets the ankles going. If we're looking at the hips, you may be looking at something like this, like the world's greatest stretch. This is a really, really simple thing which works both the hips and also the mid-back, where we're basically, again, it may not be like the easiest video to see, but I'll share this article in the chat. But basically here we're just in a little bit of a yoga position here, and we'll reach on one hand up to the sky and one hand down. Very, very simple, kind of hits the front of the hips and also hits the mid-back, can be pretty straightforward. Now, for this one, I quite like it, but a lot of people are like, I don't really like particularly getting on my hands and knees at the trailhead. I don't like that. Another option is basically just doing some big hip circles, where you're basically standing up, holding onto something for balance, and literally you're just lifting your knee up and then doing a big circle with one hip and then coming down and then coming up, big circle, and literally just doing some circles there. That works out pretty well, and it can be pretty straightforward. And if anyone did want to check out this article with those examples and a few other bits and pieces, I'll just pop them in chat so you can check that out at your own leisure. The other thing I'd sort of say is, on top of that, those are a couple of simple stretches you can kind of look at. Another idea is doing a little bit of self-massage. So you can do this if you are. This one does require you to kind of get down on the ground, so a lot of people may not particularly love it, but you can, explore this option. Doing self-massage is just basically like getting like a water bottle or whatever it may be, and doing like a bit of like foam rolling, with your water bottle. So for example, if you're looking at your ankles, you could do a little calf release where you're basically just rolling up and down your calves with this type of thing. If you're looking at like warming up hips, you might do something like quadricep release, where basically you've got your water bottle under your leg and you're rolling up and down like this. If you're trying to warm up mid-back, you might do mid-back release, again, with your water bottle, and you're just rolling up and down like this. Again, if you want to check those videos out, just check that article there, and hopefully it'll give a few ideas. So realistically, when it comes down to this type of stuff, stretching before hiking, it's not the most important thing in the world, but it can be beneficial in certain situations. So I feel like if you fall into any of these things where you struggle with aches, pains, and tiredness, if you are just leading into a pretty intense start with your hike, or mentally just a bit sluggish at the start of the day, maybe give these a go. Might be worthwhile checking out. So that will probably do me on that particular subject. So For anyone watching live, again, if you do have any questions you'd like me covering, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm always happy to cover anything you like. All right. So next up, what are we talking about? Knee soreness on up hills. And let me just make this look a little bit prettier. Um, yeah, so this is knee soreness on uphills. Really common situation for a lot of people. In the sense that when it comes down to knee pain while hiking, so many hikers struggle with knee pain. Pretty common thing. The main situation, or the majority of people tend to get that knee pain on the downhills, and a lot of people get that. But I would sort of say on top of that, a lot of people get up going up hills as well on steep ascents. So we're going to be talking about that today. Essentially, the specific question I got for this was, someone saying, "Hey, sometimes get knee soreness when going upstairs specifically. What can I do for this?" And yeah, when it comes down to this type of thing, as I said, very common situation. Very common thing that a lot of people struggle with. And when it comes down to it, there's a few recommendations I can make. Some that can make a pretty quick difference, some that takes a little bit longer to kick into effect. And essentially what we're going to talk about is a combination of technique, which can make a bit of an immediate difference, and also training, which takes a little bit longer. So on the technique side of things, there's two things you can be aware of. If you do get knee discomfort going upstairs, two things you can kind of think about, which can make a pretty big difference. Now, number one is what I call the heel push technique, which I talk about all the time. You may have heard me talk about it before, but very simple, but very effective. Now, essentially, what tends to happen here is a lot of people, when we're going upstairs or we're going up steep hills, a lot of people will be in the habit of when they're stepping, what they do is they're stepping up on their toes and their heels up in the air. And basically, we'll go through that. Now, if we are doing this in day-to-day life, if we're just doing this on short sections of stairs or whatever it may be, it's not that big a deal. It's not that going to cause too many people issues or whatever it may be. However, if you already have a history of knee pain, or if you're doing this on, say, hiking, where we've got extended periods of going up and down, this can sometimes lead to a little bit of discomfort. Because what tends to happen is we're up on our toes, what we're doing is we're putting a lot of pressure through the calves, which is a relatively small muscle group, which may fatigue early. And also on top of that, just the angle of things puts a little bit more force into the knee itself. Again, if you're just doing little bits of this, not a big deal, but if we're doing extended, sometimes can lead to aggravation. So a simple way around this is doing what we call the heel push technique. Essentially what we're doing is each step we're doing, as opposed to being up on our toes, we try to plant our foot as well as we can. And when we plant our foot, we try to put a bit of weight through the heel. It's not 100% of your weight, it's not all your weight, but trying to put a bit of weight through your heel. The idea behind this is if we can push through the heel with each step, this will get the hamstrings and the glutes doing a little bit more of the work, which are big muscles, and it will take a little bit of pressure out of the knees. Very simple, but it does do the trick pretty well. Now, this may not always be realistic on certain steps on the trail. Obviously, there's super monster steps. There's sometimes, weird awkward steps or whatever it may be, but it's definitely worth considering. So that's technique number one. Now, technique number two is just being aware of your knee movement, in the sense that one of the aggravators for people who get a little bit of knee discomfort when they're going uphill or upstairs is one thing that can happen is as we're going up and up and up and up and up our stairs, one thing that can happen is our knee, for a lot of people, will get a tendency where they'll just do knock in. Instead of staying nice and solid and nice and straight, as you take the steps, it'll knock in and it'll knock in and it'll knock in. And to give you like a visual of that, like you can kind of sort of like, this is sort of an example here. So let me show you. So imagining you're stepping up and then if this knee here was just kind of falling in every single step. Now, this type of situation, very common. If it sort of happens again in small doses, if you're just going up and down the stairs at home, whatever it may be, may not be that big a deal. But if you're doing this again and again and again and again and again on the trail, this can sometimes lead to a little bit of discomfort because that knock in can sometimes load up the knee and a little bit of discomfort, and just be not amazing. So what we can think about here is just being aware of this. Every once in a while when you're going up hills, just check in. What's my knee doing? Is it knocking in with each step I do? If so, slow things down and just concentrate on keeping it steady, making sure it doesn't fall in too much, but it's relatively steady. You can even cue yourself to push it out just a little bit and see how you go. But just being aware of that can go a long way. So they're two simple techniques, but they can make a pretty big difference. Now, one thing I will also say is specifically with the knocking in of the knees, this is easy to do when you're fresh and easy to do when you got plenty of energy. When you get tired, this tends to be where it happens. It gets more likely to happen when you're tired because muscles are fatigued and yada, yada, yada. And then also mentally, we're just not paying attention to it. So if you're aware that, hey, this is something that I actually do, and I'm aware that sometimes this aggravates things, maybe it's worthwhile just coming up with a bit of a reminder system saying, hey, when I am tired on the trail, how can I remind myself to do this type of thing? Have a think about that. Now, beyond technique, there's a few things you can kind of look at in regard to training, which sort of looks at here. Essentially, if we do get knee soreness going upstairs, simple rule of thumb is if we can build up strength in the muscles which are responsible for supporting the knees, this can go a long, long way. Now, in this specific context of going upstairs, two real main areas we want to look at which can make a bit of a difference: quadricep strength and glute strength. Now, your quadriceps, front of the thighs. Essentially, if we can build up strength through them, it'll make sure every step going up is a little bit easier, meaning less likely that the knees will knock in, which is it's just a compensation method. On top of that, it'll just take pressure off the body in itself because you're a little bit stronger as you're going up. Very, very simple. So simple exercises you can kind of look at here. Number one, like the step down that I was demoing before. This is one of my favorite exercises for hikers. I often talk about this one for specifically downhills, but in itself, it can go really a long way. Essentially, the step down, what we're doing is standing on a step or a thing. And what we're doing is we're slowly lowering ourselves down. Now, the idea behind this is essentially we're building up strength through the quadriceps, building up a little bit of strength through the glutes. And you can also see, like, I'm really, really, really fighting to reduce that knee kind of wobbling in, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. So this can kind of go a long way. Another simple exercise like the lateral step up or any type of step up, in all honesty. This particular exercise, again, very, very simple to work the quadriceps. And again, in this situation, what we're trying to do is pushing up and making sure that knee doesn't knock in and essentially going through this. Some people look at this like, oh my gosh, that's a super high step. You don't have to do it on like a step like this. You can do any kind of height that you like. But yeah, this can be a good option. And then over time, you can make this a little bit harder by loading up with some weight and some more this and that. Goes a long way. Um, and then I think I had another example. Oh yeah, and split squats, like split squats, lunges, all of that. General rule of thumb for these types of exercises, just be aware of what the knee is doing. If you do have the tendency where the knee knocks in when you're going upstairs and you're aware that that's kind of like causing me some issues, just be aware of what the knee is doing during these exercises, making sure that it is not falling in too much. If it is, then just take a second, recover, then go again. And that's a really, really good cue to focus on as you're going through. So that's a quad strength, very, very simple. Most hikers should be working those areas anyway, but it goes a long way. On the glute side of things, two specific areas we kind of want to look at. We talked a little bit about this in the last one in regards to the difference between the medius and the max for the glutes. But essentially, if we're looking at this uphill stairs with the knee pain, two areas of glute strength we want to make sure we're nailing. Number one is glute medius strength. Now, glute medius, small muscle in the glute. I think I had a picture here the other day. Let's scroll down. Here we go. Cool. Glute medius, small muscle in the glute here, basically responsible for helping support the hips, support the knees, and specifically in this context, reducing the knee from falling inwards. Goes a long way. On top of that, we got a glute maximus, which is a little bit bigger muscle, or much bigger muscle, I should say, which is responsible for a bunch of other things as well. So we want to be making sure we're strengthening up both of them. So on the glute medius side of things, you may do something like this. There's a million and one ways to go about this, doing like just a simple mini band walk. Band around your feet or your knees, whatever it may be, just going from side to side. It's simple, but it goes a long way. In this situation, you may sort of just do this as part of a warm-up in a strength workout. It can be pretty useful. Or you do like a clam or whatever it may be. Another option for that glute max side of things is doing like a glute bridge. Again, probably most people have seen this before. It can be really useful. But basically just lying on the floor, pushing your hips up. In this particular situation, we're going to dumbbell across our hips. And also in this particular variation, we've got like a band around our knees, which is specifically trying to give a little force pulling your knees in. So you actually have to push out, which, as we're talking about with that knee knocking in and out, we're trying to teach the body not to do that, which can be a nice addition. So when it comes down to this specific context, that's a nice spread of exercises which can make a bit of a different way. And then finally, just to wrap this one up, is, as I sort of said before, when it comes down to specifically the knees falling in, fatigue can be a major contributor here. in the sense that, we may be able to do this all perfectly when we're going upstairs, when we're fresh, when we're energized, when the muscles are fresh and all of that, and it may not be an issue. But one thing that can happen is as we get tired, as the muscles get sore or whatever it may be, as we've been going for a while, fatigue creeps up, the muscles don't stabilize quite as well, we start getting into bad habits, and this sort of falls into that. So to fill this gap between the strength training we're doing and the stuff that we're actually doing on the trail, we just want to fill this in with some particular type of specific training. So in this context, it'll literally be doing some stair climbing, where you find a set of stairs, you can practice going up and down, up and down, up and down, practice the heel push, practice the knee movement, even when you are getting tired. Or if you don't have access to them, just doing some step sessions, find a nice small box or a nice small step and going up and down, up and down. Again, focusing on keeping the knee happy, focusing on that heel push, and just building out that endurance. So you get that combination of the specific strength in the gym work, but then you kind of get it to that specific endurance going up and down, which will then help you on the trail. So hopefully that makes sense. So as I sort of said, knee soreness on uphills, really, really common thing. A lot of people struggle with it. But it's definitely something you can work on and make a big difference. Now, while we're here, I'm just going to share all these videos just so if anyone did want to check it out, you can have the video tutorials there. Just bear with me while I get all of these sent through on both. And I'm probably going to get blocked on Facebook from sending all these links, but we will see how we go. I'm kind of in two minds whether I'll keep doing these on Facebook, just because for whatever reason, Facebook's changed their policy where they don't actually hold the lives for very long. They only hold it for like 30 days and they're deleting them now. So I might just end up just doing them on YouTube, because, we have a good record of things on YouTube and all of that. So we'll see how we go. Either way, anyone watching this live, if you did want to drop any comments or questions in the chat, happy to answer anything while we're here. But with that being said, last question I want to cover, if nothing else comes through, is just covering push-up alternatives. And this is something that comes up quite a bit, and it's definitely worthwhile talking about. And basically the question was, look, I train at home. I'm a hiker who trains at home. I don't really have a huge amount of equipment. I do know that upper body strength is important for me, but I hate push-ups. And I think, every plan this particular person looked at had them asking to do push-ups. Is there anything else I can do instead? When it comes down to this type of thing, in all honesty, for any exercise in any area of your body that you're trying to work, there are always ways of working around things. There are always alternatives in regards to exercises. There's always a dozen different ways where you can approach particular areas for your training. Sometimes you just need to get a little bit creative, a little bit thought around. Now, for the push-ups, push-ups can be a great exercise for working upper body pushing strength, working the chest, bit of the shoulders, bit of the triceps. A lot of hikers are like, why would I bother doing that? Isn't hiking all lower body? Well, upper body strength, pretty important for helping us with poles, helping us with rock scrambling, helping us just if we do have a trip, a stumble or fall, that we have some strength to support ourselves and reduce the risk of injuries. Also help us just with pack carrying as well. So as much as lower body is always going to be the priority for hikers, then our upper body training always goes away. Push-ups themselves, really, really good. But a lot of people are like, I hate these. Maybe I can't do them. Maybe I've done them for years or whatever it may be. Just not much fun. Now, if you were in a gym environment, had access to dumbbells or barbells or machines, very, very simple to kind of substitute this type of stuff out. But if you're at home, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. So a really, really simple option, which I quite like for this particular thing, is if you're like, hey, I don't like push-ups, is just doing the floor press. So essentially the floor press, it's really, really, really simple. Literally all you're doing, you get a pack, or if you do have some weights lying around, whatever it may be, you just lie on your back and basically just pushing a pack straight up, straight down. Now, you will find this significantly easier than a push-up, purely for the fact that you can control the weight pretty effectively with how much you got here. You can, you're not doing quite as big a range of motion in the sense your elbows get stuck on the floor. So we go through this. So to make this a little bit more difficult, if you do it, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a piece of cake. There's a couple of different options available for you, depending on what you might prefer. Option number one, you can be like, you know what, I'm going to load up the pack a little bit heavier. So if this is super easy, I'm just going to use a bit more weight. Or option number two, you can just do more repetitions. So you can turn this into a bit more of an endurance thing as opposed to a strength thing. But either way, this works out pretty well. That's a really, really, really simple option. Works very, very similar muscles to the push-up. It gets what I get a lot of my hikers doing who are training from home. Goes a long way. Now, when it comes down to this exercise, as with any type of strength training, we do want to progress it over time, make sure we're giving ourselves regular, extra new challenge and not just falling into the trap doing the same thing over time. So we want to think about, okay, how can we progress this over time? Now, floor press, this will probably do you for like anywhere from like 3 to 4 to 6 weeks where you can just keep on bumping up the weight. Then after that, you need a bit of variation. One really, really good progression of this is, well, number one, if you do have like a bench or something, you can do this and actually turn this into like almost a bench press. That works out really well. But again, if you're kind of limited equipment, you may not have that. So one option I really like is doing a decline floor press. So I haven't actually loaded up a video for this yet. But I will get this up sometime soon. But essentially what it looks like is you're doing this exact same motion, but you're pushing up into a glute bridge position. So if we go back to, let's pull up, no, can't spell. Let's pull this one up. I'll show you. So basically it's a combination of kind of a glute bridge and a floor press. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to start in this position here, where basically hips are pushed up, glutes are squeezed on, you've got this position here. And then once you're in this position, you would do the floor press as you go through and pushing straight up, straight down, while maintaining that glute bridge position. Now, why this is progression, number one, it's a little bit more challenging because basically you've got to get the glutes and the abs involved a little bit more. Number two, it adds a little bit extra range of motion because the elbows can get down a little bit further. And then number three, it just changes the angle of the movement. So we typically are really, really strong when we're pushing straight up, straight down. With the decline, it kind of changes the angle a little bit, which makes it a little bit more challenging. So that can be a good option. So that may last you for another like 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. Then if you wanted, you could go back to this and use more weight, then go back to that, use more weight, and just keep on alternating between the two. Or another option might be like, okay, I've done 4 weeks of this, I've done 4 weeks of this. Maybe I want another option which is going to work, upper body pushing, but it's just slightly different. So you could, either go into push-ups again, you could give them a go and see if they're any better. Or you could sort of say, okay, I don't want to do push-ups, I've had enough of this, maybe I'll do some overhead pressing for a buddies or two. So for example, an overhead press, using a pack, this is like a half kneeling version where basically just pushing a pack straight above our head. Another option is just holding a pack in 2 arms, pushing it straight above your head there. The idea behind this, it's not working the chest quite as much, but it's still working the shoulders, still working the triceps, still will probably fall into the category of a little bit of upper body pushing training, which can go a long way. Now, final thing I'll sort of note on this is, that can be some decent options, alternatives for push-ups. One thing I will sort of say is anytime you are doing upper body exercises or any exercises in general, we always do want to make sure we are complementing whatever exercises we're doing with something else that does the opposite movement. In the sense of a lot of people online will sort of say, hey, trying to get strong for hiking, you'll see a training plan, they'll say do push-ups, do push-ups, do push-ups, whatever it may be. We're just giving you alternatives to push-ups, but if we are going to be training our upper body, we make sure we want to complement our push-ups with something that will work the back as well. So push-ups work the chest, the shoulders, the triceps. We want to make sure we're actually working the back muscles as well. So if you're doing this type of stuff, just make sure you complement with something like a 3-point row or a pack row, whatever it may be. Again, there's a million and one ways of doing this, but getting something in here where we're working our back as we're going through. I won't go into too much detail on that, but that's typically how we want to look. So let me share these exercises before I forget, so you can check them out at your own leisure as well. And then overhead press is the last one. Boom, cool. So with that being said, that's all the questions I kind of had sent through today. It doesn't look like, as far as I can see, any other questions come through. So I might wrap things up there, go get a bit of lunch before my next calls this afternoon. So for anyone watching this in the future, if any of this stuff doesn't make sense, feel free to reach out, let me know. Always happy to help. On top of that, if anyone does have any questions in the future they would like me to cover, I'm happy to sort of cover anything in these streams. Please let me know, and I'm happy to sort of help out with that. But aside from that, I really do hope anyone watching this in the future or right now or in the future has enjoyed it. Hope it makes sense and hope it gives you a few ideas for your hiking. So have a lovely day, everyone, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.